and welcome to Travel Time. Today I'm talking a little bit about our trip that we recently took to the Southwest United States. And we're going to start off today with talking about our time in Zion National Park. On the entire trip, we took almost 2 weeks, not quite 2 weeks, and visited a lot of parks in southern Utah, plus Mesa Verde and the Grand Canyon, and kind of did the grand circle, so to speak. We're going to focus first on the Zion piece because there's a lot of interesting things about each park. So rather than doing one really large overview, just going to do a couple of different segments for the podcast. We headed out late in the evening from our time and flew into Vegas. There are no major airports that are right next to any of the parks. It's usually best to fly into something like Flagstaff or Vegas, places like that, and then drive over. We picked Vegas and ended up flying in. We rented a van there. One tidbit about that is if you are traveling in the near future, there's a major rental car shortage going on right now, if you haven't already heard. And luckily we made our reservations for this van a year out. So we already had a price locked in before they knew there was going to be a rental car shortage. And we saved a pretty good amount of money doing that, plus had a van. So when we got to the airport, we saw a lot of people who had made recent reservations and were paying, based on talking to them in line, $500-$600 more than we were paying, or people who didn't reserve at all and just kind of trusted there'd be something when they. Frankly, I saw a lot of those people leaving disappointed because there just weren't enough cars for the number of people trying to get them. The people who got reservations, from what we saw, were all getting their cars, so that piece wasn't a problem there. I know I've heard it's been a problem in other parts of the country. So first tip is, if you're headed out there, make sure you have a rental. The further in advance you make your reservation, the more likely it is you're going to get a better rate. Most rental car companies work on a sliding price scale for rentals in vacation type areas, similar to how plane tickets or cruise tickets might be sold, where prices tend to go up as the availability of cars and things like that decreases. I myself used to work for a rental car agency many years ago. It's definitely a factor. As they get fewer and fewer cars, the price does go up. Or if they know something's going on in the area, the price goes up. It's always good to make reservations in advance, not just for availability purposes and to get the lowest rate from that, but as soon as people start booking conferences or things like that, the prices will go up because they know something's happening in their city. So just a tip from the rental car side of things, just based on my experience working for one and renting cars myself. We stayed the night there and in Vegas, which I'm glad we decided to do because we got in very, very late. We were supposed to get in about 10 o'clock. We had to wait for the boys to finish up school. We actually left on the last day of school and headed straight out. The plane we were supposed to be taking in had a technical issue, and it started to appear likely it wasn't going to take off at all. So we were offered the chance to jump onto a different flight that left 15 minutes later than we were currently projected to go out. And we were anticipating it would be delayed further. It was getting to the point where it had been delayed so many times we were actually wondering if it would even go out because they kept saying the air conditioning wasn't working on the plane. So we decided we're just going to flip, because even if they go, it sounds like it's not going to be a very comfortable flight because they'll just barely have it working, or it might not go at all. And then everyone who will have already rebooked, that other plane might be full. So we went ahead and jumped to the other plane. The first plane did end up going out. We ended up getting into Vegas at almost the exact same time that flight did, but at least we knew we were going to get there. And it's not upset that we made the decision we did. We ended up getting there at the same time we would have gotten there, and we probably had better air conditioning than we would have had. Just a lesson in being flexible. When the app checked in and said there have been a lot of delays, do you want to flip to this flight? We did. My husband has status with Delta, and so I think they kind of made offers to the people in that category first before they started making offers to other people. Not entirely positive, but we did get that alert through the app. So just a lesson in download your airplane's app, let it give you updates. You never know, it might be offering you to jump to another plane before they cancel the plane or things like that. So we ended up getting in instead of at 10, at close to 2 in the morning we got to the hotel. So we had originally planned to head out fairly early in the morning, like 9 o'clock, so we'd have plenty of time to maybe explore Zion a little bit both that evening and the next day. And because of getting in so late, we ended up not doing that. We Took a little bit more leisurely time in the morning, got a little bit more. We still went out so that we could have lunch on the way into town, which was our original plan. It was extremely hot, so we didn't want to walk around a lot looking for a lunch spot, just because it was well up around 1:10 when we got there. We had planned all along to kind of stop at George's Corner in St. George, Utah to have lunch, which we ended up doing. It's still about 45 to 50 minutes away from Springdale. A good distance from Las Vegas. There's not much in between Vegas and St. George. That's kind of the place, really. It has several options for food. We had planned to eat at a place called George's Corner. But when we got there, apparently there's a reason it's the number one ranked St. George, Utah on TripAdvisor. Or a lot of people use that when they're planning their trip, because it was packed and the wait was like 40 minutes, which you had to wait outside because of COVID restrictions and because of the number of people waiting. We weren't about to just stand out there in the heat just to get to that one restaurant when there are several other restaurants around. Literally next door was a place called Pasta Factory. The menu looked good, so we went ahead and popped in. That's literally all we knew about it. So it looked like there were a decent amount of people in there, but not packed, so we would get in pretty quickly. The food was good. I mean, it's nothing like earth-shattering. It's pasta. I had a pretty good meatball sub. They had a create your own pasta dish that the boys did. Basically, it was quick, tasty, and we pretty much got back on the road pretty quickly eating there. The food came out pretty quickly. At the end, when we wrapped up, they were quick with the check and we were able to leave. So from an efficiency standpoint, it was great. From a location standpoint, we were already parked there because we had intended to maybe go to George's Corner. And we didn't have to move the car or anything. I will say on the way back through, I'll mention it probably on the Grand Canyon episode, but we stopped there again on our way back to Vegas and thought we'd try St. George's, and it was so packed that time we couldn't even park, so we went to an entirely different part of the town to eat. So apparently it's an ongoing issue. It wasn't just the day we picked. We were driving to Springdale, Utah, which is where the gateway to Zion National Park is, on a Saturday. On the way out, we weren't sure, is this just Saturday? A lot of people headed into the park for the weekend, or is it always like this? On the way home, it was like a Wednesday or a Tuesday. Apparently it is an all the time thing, or at least in the summer it's an all the time thing. It's just a heads up if you're looking at rankings and different places that are suggesting restaurants and you see that one, just know, either be prepared to wait or kind of go at an off time, or just know you might want to pick someplace else. It must be good with how many people going all the time, but it didn't happen. So we continued on. We were staying at the Hampton Inn in Springdale, Utah. Springdale is, as I mentioned, the gateway town to Zion Canyon. Pretty much every hotel you could book is on the main strip of town. So when you see that there's a Zion shuttle that goes from the town to the gate of the park where you can get onto the Zion shuttle, the odds are it's going to stop really close to your hotel. It stopped at our hotel, and there were several other hotels, major hotels that was kind of in front of, but if you weren't on the stop, you were really close to the stop. You could probably see it from your hotel. We actually did not use the shuttle. I'll talk about that a bit later. We probably should have. If you are planning where you want to stay, just know you don't have to worry too much about, is this close to a shuttle stop or not? It probably. Our Hampton was really nice. It had a really nice pool area, bigger than most Hampton's pool areas. It was outdoors, had a nice kind of gated area, much bigger than normal Hampton's pools. It wasn't huge by any standards, but it was a nice pool. It was a gradual entry pool, which is also unusual for most Hamptons. Springdale, basically, so they have hotels and restaurants all along their main street. Really easy to find whatever you need, food or whatever. We got there and we decided, we had a while before it was going to be dinner time, so we got settled in our hotel. And we actually just kind of went walking to explore the town. So that day we didn't take the shuttle because we were just walking back and forth. And it was so hot, we kind of didn't want to put on our masks to go on the shuttle. We just figured if we could walk outside and we would enjoy the town, see what we could see, and go from. We kind of walked back and forth. Our intent was to walk all the way down to where we were going to catch the shuttle the next morning for our trip into Zion. But it was so hot we didn't go that far. We also kind of had a couple of restaurants in mind and wanted to kind of see them and see if they had menus posted to see which one we were going to eat at. And we ended up at the one that we planned to eat at the beginning anyway. So for whatever it's worth, there it was. We had dinner at Oscar's Grill. It's kind of a Tex-Mex restaurant in Springdale. It was very busy. The whole park and town were very busy. If the park's busy, the town's swamped pretty much, because a lot of people stay in Springdale not just to go to Zion, but they also use Springdale as a jumping off point for Bryce Canyon, because it's like an hour and a half away. So it's an easy place to stay in one hotel for a couple nights and hit 2 parks. So a lot of people do that. That makes the actual town of Springdale quite busy. But that said, we did have to wait. There were some shady spots to wait in. Either way, the wait wasn't long. I don't even think we waited 30 minutes. It wasn't an awful wait. The food was really good. We were hoping to eat inside because of the heat, but we ended up eating on the patio because that was the first available. And they had a lot of fans going, so it was comfortable, and the whole patio was shaded. And as the sun fell, it went from like 111 to like the low 80s, high 70s, and it felt a lot better. So all those things working together, the patio was fine. We were on a part of the patio where the setting sun was shining directly into our table. So one person at the table was kind of getting hit by the sun almost all the time. It's just kind of the unfortunate location of where our table was. I think any other table, we probably would have been okay for that. But we were fine. We got through all that. I would recommend that place. They have good nachos, like different kinds of tacos, things like that. Everyone was pretty happy with what they got. The service was really good. Very friendly, quick. So I definitely would recommend that place if you go there. It was also very close to our hotel, which I should mention. So afterwards, we just had to basically pop across the street and maybe a block down the road, and we were there. The next morning, we had made a reservation for a shuttle into the park. And this is when we went to Zion. They had, up until about a week before we went, the COVID protocols were that they had to keep the shuttle half full. Everyone had to wear masks, and because of that, there was a limited capacity of how many people were going into the park because the shuttles were operating at half capacity, and you had to have a ticket. So the way it was being limited to a half was you had to get on the site and get a ticket, and they released about half the tickets 2 weeks out, and then half the tickets, I think it was 2 days out or the day before or something along those lines. Well, at the 2-week mark, we got on and we didn't get a ticket. And we were a little concerned. We're going all this way. Are we going to be able to get into the park? If not, do we need to make an alternate plan? Do we need to rent a bicycle? We're probably not going to walk into the park because it's too far. We're not going to see very much. Do we want to go to a totally different park? What do we want to do? So we were looking at what the options were, not knowing for sure that we could get the shuttle tickets. I started planning, what are we going to do? My husband started looking at some extra options too. We found that there were a lot of things like Jeep tours, and there were private shuttles that you could rent a seat on, and they would take you into the park, and you could pretty much do the same things you could do except on the regular shuttle, except you had to pay. So the park shuttle was $1 to get on the park shuttle. The private shuttle, I believe we paid $40 per person. It was a big price difference. But the difference was we knew we were going into the park. We were guaranteed to get into the park, whereas the other one was still kind of a lottery. We would have to get to Vegas, and the first time we'd be able to try to get a ticket in the second group was the next morning, and we didn't know. So then, ultimately, about 3 days before our trip started, they removed the requirement for the tickets, and they were sending shuttles in at full capacity because vaccination levels had reached a point where they could do that, and as long as everybody wore masks, they were comfortable doing it. We could have waited for the shuttle. We actually had the option at that point, when we found out that was switching, we were within the cancellation window for the private shuttle. We could have canceled the shuttle, and we could have just taken the park shuttle. I was really happy ultimately that we did not, because the line for the other shuttle was insane. And it was very nice knowing we have the seat. I think it was only us and 2 or 3 other people on that shuttle that went into the park. That was a really nice thing. Just being able to A, know that we definitely could get in, and B, just having kind of a less crowded experience getting into the park. So that part was nice. We drove down to get the shuttle. I will preface this by saying that the shuttle had basically said that even though parking at the visitor center for the park fills up each day, usually if your shuttle is like 9 o'clock or earlier, you can probably get a space there or somewhere nearby. Our shuttle was at 9, and we drove down planning to be there about 20 minutes early. just so we'd have plenty of time to get checked in and get on the shuttle. The parking lots were already full, and there was very limited parking down there. We ended up parking about 2 blocks back in in a public lot that you had to pay for. And it wasn't bad, but because we had kind of banked on that, seeing that thing that said most of the time you can park all the way up to like the 9:30 shuttles, we didn't know, and so we had 7 minutes to get from our parking spot to back to the shuttle, a couple blocks. We made it like exactly at 9 o'clock. Given that, I think I would have probably woken up a little bit earlier and taken the town shuttle. We would have taken the town shuttle anyway. They run about every 15 minutes and they're pretty reliable, but the town was so busy that the one thing we were afraid of is, since we were in the middle of the route, that it would get to us and it would already be full and it would keep going and we wouldn't get picked up. We had seen a couple times where the shuttle buses were passing stops the day before, and so we were kind of iffy on if that would work. So we drove and it worked out fine. We found the spot, but if I did it again, I would probably just go ahead and take the shuttle and leave my car at the hotel and just plan to wake up earlier just to give myself more time for the shuttle. I don't have a lot of people who like early rising in my family, so I was trying to kind of do a compromise situation. But so that's my thoughts. The shuttle's probably the better option. They'll tell you the shuttle's probably the better option, even if you're going in early. If it's the summertime and the city and the town are busy, this park's going to be busy too. Just go ahead and take the shuttle and save yourself a headache. But we made it, as I said. And as I said, definitely worth it. The guy who drove the van was really nice. He gave us a little bit of information about the town and the park on the way in. I don't know if they do that on the shuttle as well, on the park shuttle as well, but it was nice. Zion does not allow cars in the park during the summer because it's too busy and it creates too much congestion. So unless you're staying at the hotel, the cars aren't allowed in the park. So shuttle buses are the only ways in. So you can take the park shuttle, which, other than the reservation system they temporarily had, I believe is free. We were told by the tour operators that they were only allowed to be doing the private shuttle thing because of the limited capacity on the park shuttle. And because they already had reservations for the shuttles for several weeks out, they were allowed to keep doing them through like the middle of the month. So we were in that sweet spot where the private shuttles were going in and the regular shuttles were going in. I'll point out that if you're going at another time, those private shuttles may not be doing that. I think normally they do other kinds of excursions. But some of the places, I think, were not doing it just for COVID. Like there were some Jeep tours and things that I think do those tours all year round, or they take in a group to do Angel's Landing together or the Narrows together, like outfitter type groups. So you may have some options like that if you're doing it. There are some drawbacks to the private shuttle option, in theory. So one drawback that we considered was they take you into one stop and that's the only stop you can go to and you come back out. But you have all day access to their shuttle. So in theory, you can come out, have lunch, and go back in to the same spot or a different spot or whatever. But you can't like go into Zion Lodge and then go from Zion Lodge to the Narrows. Whereas the park shuttle, you can go stop at whatever stop and go to the next stop whenever you're ready to go to the next stop. So in theory, we would have had to come out and then go back in to go to another section. I'll touch on that. Didn't come into play, but I'll touch on that in a moment. That's one thing to know is like if you are going in with like an outfitter or something, they're probably just going to one location and that's it. They're probably not going to multiple stops, and you probably can't treat it like the park shuttle and go to multiple stops. That said, once you're in the park, you can take the park shuttle to all those other places and just get back to the stop where your shuttle's going to pick you up later in the day. That does work. The other thing to know, if you're doing a private shuttle or a regular shuttle, no matter what, park admission's required. We have an America the Beautiful pass, which is the national park pass. We pay $80 for a family all year. We can go to as many national parks as we want. We just show our pass and our ID to show that it's ours, and we're in, and that's fine. So we always go to at least one park a year, usually go to several different parks in a year. So it's good at national battlefields, national memorials, anywhere they charge park admission and it's a national park service park, even if it's not technically a national park. It's one of their other types of parks. This year, for example, we more than made up our money's worth because each park was $20 to $30 per park. We paid $80 and got into 6 of those 6 parks, plus some more recently. We went to a couple of battlefields later in the year, like in July. We more than got our money's worth this year. And the years that we don't quite make our money's worth, my feeling is it's basically a donation to the parks, which I'm personally fine with. The year that we don't make, it's not worth our money. I think we've had one. Okay, 2020, we probably didn't make our money on it because I think we only went to one park before COVID shut everything. Maybe we've had one other year where we didn't get to more parks, but most years we hit at least 2 or 3 somewhere. Whenever we travel, we try to hit whatever national parks are near them. Oh, like I said, masks were required on the shuttle. I am not sure if that's still the case because it's kind of an ever-evolving piece. In public areas, public buildings within Zion, masks were required if you were not vaccinated, but they were not required if you were vaccinated. The town of Springdale, however, when we were there, required masks in all private buildings unless you were actively eating as a city ordinance. So from town to town throughout this trip, things were just a little bit different. So you had to kind of rely on the signs on wherever you were, or if they didn't have signs up, kind of what everybody else was doing. So that was kind of an evolving adventure through the trip. We need them, where do we not need them? We just carried them with us in case we needed them somewhere. But for the most part, we didn't need them because all 4 of us were fully vaccinated by the time we went. So that was a nice piece. We took the shuttle in. One thing I would talk about when I mentioned that in normal times we couldn't take a pirate shuttle in and then go to a bunch of different stops and come back out with it unless we switched to the Zion shuttle. Because of COVID, the number of Zion Park shuttle stops was down from, I think, 6 to 4. But the day that we were there were only 2 open. So the front gate was open, that shuttle stop, which was stop number 1, I think, and the Zion Lodge shuttle stop. And Zion Lodge is where you can get the trails to Angel Landing, I think Hidden Canyon, Emerald Pools trails. You can enter the Kayenta Trail from around that area. Those kinds of things are all in that area. Obviously Zion Lodge as well. But Temple of Sinawaba, which is the stop where the Narrows, which is kind of the iconic picture of Zion is, that one was fully closed. And the stop that had the Weeping Rock also was closed. So those were those 2 that had been open but weren't open. I believe the Great White Throne also closed. So anyway, it was just Zion Lodge was open. When we went in, we found out it was due to a search and rescue mission. I mean, it was extremely hot that day and had been the day before. On the way out, we found out there were actually 6 search and rescue missions the day we were in there, which was a huge amount for what's a relatively small search and rescue squad compared to the number of missions they had that day. They had, I think they said 4 due to heat issues where people were having kind of heat exhaustion or things like that and had to be evacuated. 1 was someone who sounded like they had broken their ankle or really badly sprained their ankle. They were in the middle of climbing Angel's Landing and I guess they were stranded at the top or near the top. And then the one that closed, the one that contributed the most to the closure was there was a hiker or a climber that had gone back into the Narrows and was bouldering or canyoneering and climbing back there and went into a canyon that was closed to the public. So it's not there are signs up, canyon's closed to the public, but they went in. It's a very narrow canyon, and when they were climbing, their rope broke and they fell. And I guess they were having trouble getting her out because they couldn't get their helicopters in. The canyon was too narrow. So after they found her, they were having trouble getting her out. At the time we went into the park, they were still looking for her. And they had been since the day before. And then later in the day, we found out that they had even called a helicopter up from Grand Canyon that was good at smaller spaces or fitting in smaller spaces, and they couldn't get in there either. We did find out the next day when we were at Bryce Canyon. We read in the paper that she had passed away before they were able to get her out of the canyon to help. They did find her, but they couldn't get her out. Pretty sad day there, but it was closed. It ended up opening, I guess, later that afternoon, from what we heard. And people were able to go back into that area, but we basically ended up having to skip it altogether because it wasn't an option for us. The whole stop was done. The other side effect of that was every single person going into Zion Park that day was going into that same stop we were going into. Lots of people hiking Angel's Landing. They were parsing out how many could go at any time. So many per hour could enter the trail, and there were people just kind of waiting for their turn to go on that trail. We didn't do that trail. we went on the Emerald Pools Trail, which was great. And the first part of it wasn't too congested, but then we got to the middle where it got a little bit more rugged. There were some backups. There were a couple times when we were just stopped on the trail waiting for the people in front of us to go so that we could keep going. So a little more congested than you'd like to have kind of a nice hiking experience, but a lot of that was due not just to the park being busy, but also because everyone was in that part of the trail, and that was the only, really the only non-rugged trail. It was rated as a moderate that was at that stop, so it was extremely busy. It was worth it. The view of the pools at the top was beautiful, and we enjoyed that a lot. We did get to sit down and kind of just enjoy that a little bit. The upper pool is well worth the extra effort. When we went, I believe it was the middle pool or the lower, one of the pool, either the lower or the middle was closed. And so we got to see it. And the other pool is smaller and still pretty, and it's nice scenery, but I'm really glad. Originally I had been thinking that we might not go up to the upper pool, and we decided to go because we found out we couldn't do any of the other hikes we'd planned for that day. And so we just went ahead and went, and it was really beautiful. I'm really happy I went. But between the altitude and the crowds and the heat, it was a difficult trek for sure. So we got off the trail after that one, and I believe it was about a 6 mile hike round trip to go all the way up to the upper hill and back, upper pool and back. So we stopped at the lodge in the shade and had a picnic. We checked with a ranger to see if they had opened up the Temple of Sinawava stop yet. They had not. They were still only going back south on the park shuttle. So we just kind of stayed in the shade. There's a bottle filling station at the lodge, so we were able to fill up our water bottles. You do not want to go into Zion without water. There are only a few limited places where you can fill up water bottles. And it's extremely hot and extremely dry, and the altitude is very high. So make sure you're carrying water. We carried in, most of us had hydration backpacks. My husband just brought in bottles of water, but the boys and I all had hydration backpacks, which was very helpful. We could carry a little food and carry water. We were sitting there eating lunch, just kind of resting from the shade and doing a little recovery from the hike, because we're not in a place that has altitude. We're well under 1,000 feet above sea level, and this was, in the 3,500, 4,000 range. So it was a big change for us from just the day before. And we decided that rather than, kind of do another, just kind of wander around there, that we would drive up to Kolob Canyon, which is the westernmost section of the park. And it's typically a lot less populated. There are lots less people there. But I had heard it's really beautiful. It's just not the Zion Canyon that you picture when you see the photos and stuff all the time. So we decided our hotel was up in that area because we had lost our reservation at Bryce Canyon due to COVID. So we were staying in a cabin at Bryce Canyon. I'll talk about this a little bit on the next episode. But basically because of COVID, they closed all of the cabins after we already had a reservation. And they were only keeping the hotel open inside the park and the Canyon Lodge. And so the Canyon Lodge was already full by the time they canceled the cabin. So we had to kind of scramble at the last minute and get a different hotel for that one night. And where we ended up staying was Cedar City, Utah, which was actually not too far past Kolob Canyons. Like we went around that end of the canyon to get to Bryce instead of the normal way because of the hotel. So we'll just go to Kolob Canyon so that we can see some more things, and it's near our hotel, so that'll work out well. I am so happy we did that. I will say Kolob Canyons was beautiful. I would be surprised if we saw a total of 35 people the entire time we were in that section of the park. It's so much less crowded. We did see people, but not very many. There are trails back there. By the time we got there, it was like late afternoon and the sun was broiling, so we didn't do any trails. We did the scenic drive all the way out to the end of the Kolob Canyons area and stopped at all the overlooks and things, and it was just gorgeous. We did see a California condor while we were in that section, There was one flying overhead. So we were able to see that, which was great to see. I mean, very few people get to see them. There is a California condor pair that live in Zion Canyon, and they just hatched their second baby condor this year. The first baby condor that they ever had, that couple hatched, just fledged the nest. I think it was like 6 months ago, I saw on TV, and has been sighted down at Vermilion Cliffs, which is down towards the Grand Canyon. He's out of the nest, he's doing fine, and they have a new baby, so that was really kind of exciting. I guess they stay in the nest for close to 1 to 2 years until they're big enough to head out on their own, is what it sounds like. So anyway, lots of backcountry trails, lots of regular trails in Kolob Canyon. It's definitely worth a stop. The views are beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. It's a totally different kind of scenery than Zion Canyon. It's not the Slot Canyon look as much, but the views are no less beautiful. They're just a different kind of beautiful. I will say, the night before we went into Zion Canyon, when we were waiting to get into Oscars, we had heard a few people kind of talking over whether they were going to Zion or Bryce the next day. And we had heard a couple people say that they were going to Bryce because one of the shuttle stops was closed in Zion, and they were hoping that if they went to Bryce that day, then they could go to Zion the next day and still be able to go to the places they wanted to go. And I didn't think much about it at the time, but it turned out it was because they had been in the park when the stop got closed because of the search and rescue mission, and they knew that the stop was still closed and they didn't want to go in if they couldn't go back to the Narrows. And so we were just I was kind of secretly hoping maybe that means a lot of people went to Bryce today that we're going to go to Bryce the day after and just flip-flop the days, and maybe that'll make Bryce less crowded the next day, which I think was probably the case. Couple things just to wrap up on Zion. I will say, if you need a place to stay and you're having trouble finding one to stay, Cedar City isn't the first thought most people have of where to stay, but the Hampton there was nice, and it was really easily accessible to the highway, and it was an easy on, easy off. A couple of restaurants around there if you do end up staying there. Couple overall thoughts on Zion though. Zion is hot if you go in the summer. It's just going to be hot. One of the reasons we went immediately after the kids got out of school, like on the day they got out of school, was because looking at the average temperatures every time, June for most of the places we were visiting was like 10 to 15 degrees cooler in June than it was in July and August. And we were going to have to go in the summer because that's when the boys were out of school. So we went knowing it would be hot. We knew this was probably going to be the hottest park of all the days that we were anywhere. And we were just kind of happy that it wasn't even hotter. But just know that if you're going in the summer, it's going to be hot. The evenings get pretty cool. I never quite needed a sweatshirt or anything, but the daytimes are definitely hot and you need to carry water. So plan for bringing cooling clothes, sunscreen. If you're not used to the altitude, or even if you are, you're closer to the sun, obviously, so you do burn fairly quickly, especially if you're of partially Irish descent like me. And then just water. Carry more water than you think you need. We all brought a full bladder that each one of ours held like 3 quarts, I think. And then we also had extra bottled water in a bag in case we got up somewhere where there wasn't water and we needed some more. So we packed in a decent amount of water, and we actually filled up our water bladders at the hotel with half ice and half water, which was a great thing. I'm really glad we did that because for most of the hike we were drinking pretty cold water. It wasn't until about midway through the hike that it started to be warmer water, and it was really refreshing. And the ice in the water bladder we had packed in deli sandwiches, and we just packed the deli sandwiches in next to the water bladder with the ice in it, and it lasted, and the sandwiches were still cold when we had our lunch. So that worked really well. Just kind of a nice cheater way to do it, so you're not carrying ice that's not useful and you end up dumping out. Also, Zion is busy. Plan ahead in whatever plan you have that you're going to have time waiting on shuttles. You're going to encounter crowds in the summer, so if you stop to eat somewhere, if you're waiting, as I said, waiting on the shuttle, or if you're trying to, even on some of the trails, you're going to have to wait sometimes. So don't plan your schedule so tightly that you don't leave time for waiting. The biggest tip I would have is go in early to stay away of the heat and the crowds. It would be better to be in the park like by 8, 9, 9:30 than to go in at noon, like 11 or 12. Like, you may get to sleep in, you'll have more rest, but you're in there at the hottest part of the day. So the crowds were definitely much worse when we were leaving the park. So when we left the Zion Canyon area, it was probably 1:30, somewhere between 1 and 2, because we hiked and then we ate lunch and then we came out. By noon, it was packed, absolutely packed. In the morning, there were a lot of people, but it was like you could hike for a fair distance and only see a couple. In the afternoon, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing lots and lots of people. Just if you enjoy a little bit less crowds, or if you're just trying to beat the heat, I would go earlier in the day. You also have less waits on shuttles, things like that. Some of the trails, because of the heat, you really can't even do them. Like Angel's Landing, they strongly suggest that you leave in the morning or don't go up. Not because of the time it takes to hike, which is also a factor, but also because of the heat. I will also say, as I mentioned, Kolob Canyons is gorgeous, and I would really encourage just going and checking it out, even if you're just doing the scenic drive. So do the stuff you want to do in Zion Canyon and take the drive up. And the scenic drive is a great way to end the day. You're in the air conditioning of your car, presumably, and you can just see a lot of things. I also highly recommend packing a luncheon. There is some food at Zion Lodge, but not a lot. And packing a luncheon just lets you eat whenever and wherever you're hungry. And you don't have to leave the park to get food. You don't have to be limited to what the one food service in Zion Canyon has. You're there and you can eat it when you have it. So like for our trip, what we did was we had brought a backpack cooler on the trip, and on the first day, on the way into town, we stopped at a grocery store and we picked up some lunch meat and some bags of chips and some apples. Apples were nice because they are a little sturdier, and if you get them cold, they can actually help keep your other stuff cold. So we just got a few things that were not melty that we could pack in. We got some freezer bags and filled them with ice each day, put them in our bags and carried our food in. We packed lunch into several of the parks just to save the time and to not have to leave the park to get food. Good plan. The backpack cooler was awesome because we could just pack it flat in our luggage. And at the last hotel, we just dried it out, which was at the Grand Canyon, convenient because it was very dry, and packed it back into our luggage and took it home. And it took up almost no space in the luggage, but we could carry around bottles of cold water and sandwiches and things like that with no problem. As I said before, have a loose plan for what to hike and see, but be ready to pivot if areas are closed due to search and rescue like we did, or due to crowds, things like that. Just have kind of some backups. And just be aware parking in Springdale is not plentiful and not awesome. So, I mean, it is what it is. There's just a lot of people trying to park right at the mouth of the park. Use the town shuttle. As I said, we probably would do that if we were there again. Note that none of the parking is free. So you're not going to park alongside the road and get free parking. The only free parking is at the visitor center, and it's pretty much over at 8 o'clock. So plan that if you're not going to take the shuttle, which is free, you're going to be paying for parking. I think it was about $20. So just be ready for that. And that is Springdale and Zion. So in our next episode, we will talk about Bryce Canyon and our day there, and thoughts about staying there and the things we saw. Hopefully share the rest of this Southwest adventure with you guys. Thank you and happy travel.